Charles Young's eyes snap open as blaring alarms shatter the silence of his cramped cell on Andromedan penal station Zeta 9. The piercing wail signals more than just a routine drill. It's the catalyst for a series of events that will force him to make an impossible choice between his own freedom and the survival of an alien race. Guards rush past his cell, their panicked shouts echoing through the metal corridors. "Critical malfunction in life support. Evacuate immediately." The chaos outside stands in stark contrast to the eerie stillness inside Charles's cell. Then, without warning, his cell door slides open with a pneumatic hiss. Heart pounding, Charles steps into the corridor. The acrid smell of smoke fills his nostrils as he's jostled by the surge of inmates and guards alike, all desperate to escape the doomed station. This is his chance, perhaps his only chance, for freedom after years of confinement. As Charles navigates the panicked crowd, a strong hand grips his arm. He turns to find himself face to face with Tara, an Andromedan guard notorious for her ruthless enforcement of station rules. Her violet eyes lock onto his, filled with an intensity that makes Charles' blood run cold. Without a word, Tara drags him into a nearby maintenance shaft, away from the chaos. The narrow space forces them close together, and Charles can feel the heat radiating from her alien body. She speaks, her voice urgent and low. "Listen carefully, human. The station is lost, but that's the least of our concerns. My species faces extinction." Charles blinks, struggling to process her words. "What are you talking about?" Tara's grip tightens. "A genetic defect has rendered us infertile. Your kind, humans, are our only hope for survival. You're compatible with us." The implications of her statement hit Charles like a punch to the gut. He tries to pull away, but Tara is faster. In one fluid motion, she draws a weapon, its energy core humming with latent power. "You don't have a choice," she hisses. "You'll help us, or you'll die here with the station." Left with no alternative, Charles allows Tara to lead him deeper into the bowels of Zeta 9. As they navigate through dimly lit service tunnels, she reveals more of the Andromedans' desperate plan. For months, select guards have been choosing human inmates, preparing for this very moment. The station's destruction is no accident. It's a cover for their last-ditch effort to save their species. They emerge into a vast chamber filled with medical equipment. Dozens of Andromedan females turn to stare at Charles, their eyes filled with a mix of hope and grim determination. He realizes with growing horror that he's trapped between two impossible choices: help save an alien race at the cost of his freedom, or resist and potentially doom an entire species to extinction. As Charles stands frozen in the doorway, the weight of the decision bearing down on him, he can't help but wonder, is this how humanity's first foray into interstellar breeding begins? With coercion and desperation on a dying space station? The alarms continue to blare, a countdown to the station's demise. Time is running out, and Charles must decide. Will he become the reluctant savior of the Andromedan race, or will he fight against this forced role in an alien reproduction scheme? Charles's heart raced as he stepped into the vast chamber, his eyes widening at the sight before him. Rows of medical equipment lined the walls, their purpose now horrifyingly clear. Dozens of Andromedan females turned to face him, their violet eyes filled with a mixture of hope and desperation that made his stomach churn. Before he could fully process the scene, a tall, slender Andromedan in a white coat approached. "I am Dr. Zara, lead scientist of this operation," she said, her voice calm but urgent. "We have little time, so I'll be brief." As Dr. Zara spoke, Charles noticed Tara beginning to remove her uniform. His attention snapped back to the scientist as she continued. "Our population has been in rapid decline due to a genetic defect rendering us infertile. This project is our last hope for survival." Charles's gaze darted around the room, taking in the alien females in various states of undress. Their skin seemed to glow with a soft, bioluminescent light, pulsing gently in the dim chamber. The sight was both beautiful and unnerving. Dr. Zara produced a tablet-like device. "This contract outlines the terms of your participation. In exchange for your cooperation, we offer freedom and a new identity upon completion of the program." Charles's mind reeled. "Program? How long are we talking about?" The breeding process is complex, Dr. Zara explained. It's not just a physical act. We've developed a series of medical procedures to ensure successful fertilization and gestation. As if on cue, the station's alarms blared louder, the sound penetrating even this secluded chamber. Tara, now fully disrobed, approached Charles. "We're out of time," she hissed. "The station's life support is failing. It's now or never." Charles's eyes darted between the contract, Tara's alien form, and the expectant faces of the andromedan females. With a shaky hand, he took the stylus and signed. Immediately, Dr. Zara ushered him towards a cylindrical chamber. "This will sterilize and prepare you for the procedure," she explained as the door sealed shut. Inside, Charles felt a series of sharp pricks as injections were administered automatically. A blue light swept over his body repeatedly, accompanied by a low hum. Through the transparent walls, he could see Tara entering a similar chamber, her bioluminescent skin pulsing more rapidly now. After what felt like an eternity, but was likely only minutes, the chamber opened. Charles stepped out, feeling oddly energized despite the surreal situation. Dr. Zara led him to another room, this one dominated by a large, egg-shaped pod. "This is the breeding chamber," she explained, activating a control panel. "It's designed to create optimal conditions for human andromedan conception." As Charles entered the pod, Tara joined him. Her skin was glowing brighter now, patterns of light rippling across her body in hypnotic waves. Dr. Zara's voice came through a speaker inside the chamber. "I'm activating the environmental controls now. You'll feel changes in temperature, humidity, and even gravity. This is normal and necessary for the process." True to her words, Charles felt the air around him shift. It became warmer, more humid. Then, startlingly, he felt lighter, as if the gravity had been reduced. "The force field is active," Dr. Zara continued. "You won't be disturbed. Remember, the fate of our species rests on the success of this encounter." With those words, the speaker fell silent. Charles turned to face Tara, truly seeing her alien form for the first time. Her violet eyes met his, filled with a complex mixture of emotions: fear, hope, commitment. As they stood there, the gravity of the situation hit Charles full force. He was about to potentially father a new hybrid species, forever altering the course of both human and Andromedan history. The station's alarms continued their muffled wail beyond the force field, a constant reminder of the ticking clock. Tara reached out, her bioluminescent hand hovering inches from Charles' chest. "Are you ready?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Charles swallowed hard, his mind racing with the implications of what was about to happen. He opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. Instead, he gave a small nod, steeling himself for what was to come. As Tara's hand made contact with his skin, Charles felt an electric tingle course through his body. The chamber's lights dimmed, leaving only the ethereal glow of Tara's bioluminescence to illuminate their forms. The air around them seemed to pulse with energy, charged with the weight of two species' futures. In that moment, suspended in the specially calibrated environment of the breeding chamber, Charles and Tara began the process that would either save the Andromedan race or mark the final chapter in their species' history. The fate of an entire civilization now rested in their hands, their bodies, their very genes. Outside the chamber, Dr. Zara and the other Andromedan females watched the monitoring equipment with nervous excitement, hoping against hope that this daring plan would succeed. The station's alarms continued their relentless warning, counting down the precious little time they had left. As Charles and Tara stood face to face in the breeding chamber, the full weight of their situation crashed down upon them. The station's alarms faded to a distant hum as the chamber's environmental controls activated, creating an otherworldly atmosphere designed to optimize their compatibility. The air around them thickened, becoming heavy with a sweet alien aroma that sent Charles's senses into overdrive. He inhaled deeply, feeling the scent permeate his very being. Tara's violet eyes locked onto his, her bioluminescent skin pulsing with anticipation. She reached out, her slender fingers hovering just above Charles' chest. The moment her hand made contact, an electric current seemed to surge through his body. Charles gasped, overwhelmed by the intensity of the sensation. The fertility treatments he'd received earlier had heightened his sensitivity to Tara's touch in ways he couldn't have imagined. As they began the intimate process, Charles found himself drawn to Tara's alien physiology with a primal attraction that both thrilled and terrified him. Her skin glowed brighter, patterns of light rippling across her body in hypnotic waves. He realized, with a jolt of understanding, that this was part of the andromedan reproductive process, a visual indicator of potential conception. Outside the chamber, Dr. Zara and her team huddled around an array of advanced screens, monitoring every aspect of the encounter. Vital signs, hormone levels, and genetic compatibility markers scrolled across the displays in a dizzying array of data. "Hormone levels are optimal," one of the scientists announced, her voice tense with anticipation. "Genetic compatibility at 97% and rising." Dr. Zara nodded, her eyes never leaving the central screen. "Maintain environmental stability. We can't afford any fluctuations now." Inside the chamber, Charles and Tara remained oblivious to the scrutiny they were under. Their world had narrowed to just the two of them, lost in the intensity of their encounter. Tara's bioluminescence intensified, bathing the entire chamber in an ethereal glow that pulsed in rhythm with their movements. Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the medical bay, distinct from the station's ongoing alert. Dr. Zara spun towards a secondary console, her face paling as she read the incoming reports. "Critical systems failing across multiple sectors," she announced, her voice tight with concern. "The station's deterioration is accelerating beyond our initial estimates." The medical team exchanged worried glances. One of them spoke up. "Should we begin evacuation procedures?" Dr. Zara hesitated, her gaze darting between the chamber and the flashing warning lights. The success of this encounter was crucial not just for Tara, but for the entire Andromedan species. Yet if they waited too long, they risked losing everything. Before she could respond, a burst of blinding energy emanated from within the breeding chamber. The monitoring systems overloaded, screens flickering and sparking before going dark. "What was that?" Dr. Zara demanded, frantically working to bring the systems back online. As the displays flickered back to life, the readings left the entire team stunned. The energy burst had somehow accelerated the fertilization process, showing early signs of successful conception. However, the speed of this development was unprecedented, raising immediate concerns about potential complications. With the station's situation becoming critical, Dr. Zara made her decision. "Terminate the breeding session," she ordered, overriding the chamber's lock. The door slid open with a hiss, flooding the dim chamber with harsh light. Charles and Tara, still dazed from their encounter, blinked in confusion as medical staff rushed in to separate them. "What's happening?" Charles asked, his voice hoarse as he was led to a recovery area. No one answered him. Instead, he was subjected to a barrage of tests, medical staff swarming around him with scanners and sampling devices. Through the chaos, he caught glimpses of Tara being whisked away, her body already showing signs of rapid changes. As Charles slowly regained his composure, he began to overhear frantic conversations among the Andromedan staff. "The conception was successful, but the station is falling apart around us," one scientist hissed to another. "We can't risk moving Tara and the others in their condition, but we can't stay here either." Before Charles could process this information, a hush fell over the medical bay. He looked up to see an imposing figure enter the room, an Andromedan male with a stern demeanor and military bearing. "Commander Vex," Dr. Zara acknowledged, straightening her posture. "We weren't expecting you." The commander's eyes swept the room, taking in the chaotic scene. "I demand an immediate status report, Doctor," he said, his voice cold and authoritative. "I want to know exactly what's been going on in this facility." As Dr. Zara began to brief Commander Vex on the situation, Charles realized that his role in this interstellar drama was just getting started. The success of his encounter with Tara had made him an invaluable asset to the Andromedans, but it had also placed him squarely in the middle of what appeared to be a brewing power struggle between the scientific and military factions. He watched as Commander Vex's expression darkened with each word of Dr. Zara's explanation. The commander's eyes flickered towards Charles, narrowing slightly before returning to the doctor. "This is a violation of multiple protocols," Vex growled. You've risked everything on this desperate gamble." "It was our only choice," Dr. Zara countered, her voice firm despite the commander's intimidating presence. "And it worked. We have a viable conception." As their heated discussion continued, Charles found himself caught in a whirlwind of activity. Medical staff continued to monitor him closely, running more tests and taking more samples. Through a nearby doorway, he could see Tara being prepared for emergency transport, her skin glowing even brighter than before. The station's alarms, which had faded into the background during the intensity of the breeding process, now reasserted themselves with renewed urgency. A violent shudder ran through the floor, causing everyone to stumble. Commander Vex steadied himself against a console, his face grim. "We're out of time," he announced. "We need to evacuate now, regardless of the risks." As the Andromedan staff burst into frenzied action, Charles realized that the true test of survival, for himself, for Tara, and for the entire Andromedan species, was only just beginning. The station shuddered again, more violently this time, sending equipment crashing to the floor. "We need to move now," Commander Vex barked, his authoritative voice cutting through the chaos. "All military personnel, prepare for immediate evacuation." Dr. Zara's head snapped up, her eyes widening with alarm. "We can't leave yet. The females who've undergone the procedure need specialized care. Moving them now could jeopardize everything we've worked for." The two Andromedans faced off, tension crackling between them like an electrical storm. The medical staff froze, caught between their scientific mission and the clear chain of command. Charles, still reeling from the intense experience in the breeding chamber, noticed a change in Tara. Her bioluminescent skin, which had been pulsing with a steady rhythm, now flickered erratically, her face contorted in pain, a low moan escaping her lips. Without thinking, Charles broke free from the guards who had been monitoring him. He rushed to Tara's side, ignoring the shouts of protest from the Andromedan security personnel. "Something's wrong," he called out, placing a hand on Tara's forehead. It was burning hot, far beyond what he assumed was normal for her species. "The conception? It's happening too fast." Dr. Zara pushed past Commander Vex, her scientific curiosity overriding protocol. She ran a quick scan over Tara, her expression growing more concerned by the second. "He's right," she announced, her voice tight with worry. "The accelerated conception is causing severe complications. We need to stabilize her immediately, or we'll lose both Tara and the embryo." Commander Vex's face darkened. He gestured to his guards. "Restrain the human. He's interfering with—" "Wait," Dr. Zara interrupted, holding up a hand. "Commander, Charles's human physiology might be the key to stabilizing Tara's condition. We need his help." Vex hesitated, clearly torn between his duty and the potential to save their mission. Finally, he gave a curt nod. "Fine, but he works under close supervision. One wrong move and he's back in restraints." Charles didn't waste a second. Drawing on his limited knowledge of human biology and the bits of information he'd gleaned about Andromedan physiology, he began suggesting treatments. "We need to slow down the growth rate," he explained, working alongside Dr. Zara. "In human pregnancies, rapid cell division can lead to complications. Maybe we can use a combination of hormones and temperature regulation to decelerate the process." Dr. Zara's eyes lit up with understanding. She began barking orders to her team, implementing Charles' ideas with lightning speed. The medical bay became a flurry of activity as they worked to save Tara and the precious life growing within her. Minutes ticked by, feeling like hours. Charles held Tara's hand, whispering words of encouragement as the Andromedan medical team fought to stabilize her condition. Slowly, agonizingly, her bioluminescence began to steady, the erratic flashing giving way to a more regular pulse. Just as they began to breathe a collective sigh of relief, a new crisis struck. The artificial gravity flickered, then failed completely. Equipment, medical supplies, and personnel began to float, turning the already chaotic scene into a three-dimensional nightmare. Charles's mind raced, his engineering background kicking into high gear. "The gravity generators must be failing," he called out, pushing off a nearby console to steady himself. "If we don't restore it soon, we won't be able to continue treatment or evacuate safely." Commander Vex, who had been coordinating with his team, turned to Charles with a mixture of suspicion and desperation. "What do you propose, human?" Charles took a deep breath, formulating a plan. "We need to reroute power from non-essential systems to maintain gravity in the medical bay. It's risky, but it's our only shot at keeping everyone grounded long enough to stabilize the patients and evacuate." Vex's eyes narrowed, weighing the options. Another violent tremor rocked the station, making the decision for him. "Do it," he ordered. "Take a team of our technicians and make it happen." Charles nodded, his mind already mapping out the station's systems based on what he'd seen. He quickly assembled a team of Andromedan engineers, explaining his plan as they made their way through the floating debris towards the main power distribution center. The journey was treacherous. Corridors that had once been straight paths were now three-dimensional obstacle courses. Loose equipment turned into dangerous projectiles, forcing the team to dodge and weave as they progressed. Reaching the power center, Charles and the Andromedan technicians got to work. Their fingers flew over control panels, rerouting power and bypassing safety protocols. It was a dangerous gambit. One wrong move could plunge the entire station into darkness or trigger a catastrophic overload. As Charles worked, he couldn't help but marvel at the Andromedan technology. Despite the dire circumstances, a part of him thrilled at the chance to interact with such advanced systems. He pushed the thought aside, focusing on the task at hand. Back in the medical bay, Dr. Zara made a startling discovery. As she monitored Tara's improving condition, she noticed unusual readings from several other Andromedan females who had been in proximity during the breeding procedure. "This is impossible," she muttered, running the scans again. Her eyes widened as the results confirmed her suspicion. The energy signature from Charles and Tara's encounter, it's affected the others. They're showing early signs of spontaneous conception. The implications of this discovery sent shockwaves through the medical team. What had started as a desperate experiment with a single pair had potentially jump-started a wave of pregnancies. It was an unprecedented development that could change the fate of the entire Andromedan species. Commander Vex, upon hearing the news, realized their evacuation plans would need to change drastically. The number of potentially pregnant Andromedans far exceeded the capacity of their emergency vessels. Every female showing signs of conception would need specialized care during transport. As this new reality sank in, Charles's voice crackled over the comm system. "Gravity restoration in progress," he announced, his voice strained with effort. "Brace for sudden reorientation." Moments later, the medical bay shuddered as gravity reasserted itself. Equipment and personnel crashed to the floor, but the relief of being grounded again was palpable. Charles and his team returned looking exhausted but triumphant. However, there was no time for celebration. The station's structural integrity alarms reached a fever pitch, warning of imminent collapse. Commander Vex's voice cut through the noise. "All personnel, proceed to emergency vessels immediately. This is not a drill. Move!" As the evacuation order was given, Charles found himself thrust into a new role. His knowledge of human physiology and his quick thinking had made him an invaluable asset. He worked alongside Dr. Zara and her team, helping to transport Tara and the other affected Andromedan females to the evacuation area. The journey through the failing station was harrowing. Corridors collapsed behind them and systems failed in cascading patterns. Charles's reflexes were pushed to the limit as he helped navigate the group through the treacherous path, using his engineering knowledge to bypass blocked routes and jury-rig emergency systems. Finally, they reached the emergency vessels, but their trials were just the beginning. As they began loading the pregnant Andromedans onto the ships, a new problem emerged. The vessel's life support systems weren't designed to handle the unique needs of the accelerated pregnancies. Charles, his mind racing, spoke up. "We need to modify the life support systems. If we can salvage components from the medical bay, we might be able to adapt them to support the pregnancies during transport." Commander Vex, who had been coordinating the evacuation, turned to Charles with a mix of frustration and grudging respect. "How long will these modifications take?" "Not long," Charles assured him, already mentally sketching out the necessary changes. "But we'll need to work fast." As Charles and a team of Andromedan engineers set to work on the life support modifications, Commander Vex received an urgent communication. His face grew even more serious as he listened, his eyes darting between the busy work crews and the trembling walls of the docking bay. Dr. Zara approached him, her voice low. "What is it, Commander?" Vex's expression was grim as he responded. "An Andromedan battlecruiser is responding to our distress signal. They'll be here soon, but—" He trailed off, his gaze settling on Charles as the human worked feverishly on the life support systems. Dr. Zara understood immediately. "They don't know about the breeding program or Charles' involvement," she finished for him. Vex nodded curtly. "We have a decision to make, Doctor, and not much time to make it." As they grappled with this new complication, Charles called out from the emergency vessel. "Modifications complete! We should be able to support the accelerated pregnancies now." Just then, the station shuddered violently, more severely than ever before. Alarms blared, warning of critical structural failures throughout the facility. Through the docking bay's viewports, they could see the massive form of the Andromedan battlecruiser approaching. Time had run out. They needed to evacuate now, but the question remained, what would they do about Charles? As debris began raining down around them and the emergency vessels prepared for launch, the fate of the human who had become integral to the Andromedan survival hung in the balance. Commander Vex and Dr. Zara exchanged a loaded glance, the weight of their species' future pressing down on them. With the battlecruiser looming ever closer and the station beginning its death throes, they had mere moments to make a decision that would shape the course of Andromedan history. History and the fate of an entire species. As debris rained down around them, Commander Vex made his decision. "Charles comes with us," he barked, gesturing for the human to board the nearest emergency vessel. "We don't have time for debate. Move!" Dr. Zara and Charles rushed to help Terra and the other affected Andromedans into the modified vessel. The station groaned and shuddered, metal screeching as it began to tear apart. With seconds to spare, the last of the crew scrambled aboard, and the airlock sealed with a hiss. The vessel's engines roared to life, propelling them away from the doomed station. Through the viewports, they watched as the structure buckled and collapsed, disappearing into the swirling atmosphere of the gas giant. The spectacular explosion illuminated the sky, casting an eerie glow over the fleeing ships. As they approached the looming Andromedan battlecruiser, tension filled the cabin. Commander Vex's communicator crackled to life, a stern voice demanding identification and explanation. "This is Commander Vex of Research Station Epsilon," he responded, his tone carefully neutral. "Requesting emergency docking and medical assistance." The voice on the other end belonged to Admiral Krell, known throughout the Andromedan fleet for his unwavering adherence to protocol. "Granted," came the curt reply. "Prepare for immediate boarding and inspection upon docking." As the emergency vessels were drawn into the cruiser's cavernous docking bay, Charles felt a growing sense of unease. The enormity of the situation was beginning to sink in. He was about to come face to face with an entire crew of Andromedans who had no idea of his existence or purpose. The moment the airlock opened, a contingent of armed Andromedan security personnel swarmed in, their weapons trained on the occupants. Admiral Krell strode in behind them, his bioluminescent patterns pulsing with hardly restrained anger. "Explain the presence of this creature," Krell demanded, pointing at Charles. Commander Vex stepped forward, positioning himself between Charles and the Admiral. "Admiral, I can explain." But Krell's attention had already shifted to the group of Andromedan females being carefully helped out of the vessel. Their altered bioluminescence and visible physical changes were impossible to ignore. "What is the meaning of this?" Krell's voice was low and dangerous. Dr. Zara, recognizing the futility of deception, spoke up. "Admiral, we've made a breakthrough in our efforts to combat the infertility crisis. This human, Charles, has been instrumental in—" "Silence!" Krell roared. "You dare to violate our most sacred laws of genetic purity?" He turned to his security team. "Imprison the human immediately. Quarantine the affected females." As the guards moved to seize Charles, Tara suddenly collapsed, her bioluminescence flickering wildly. The ship's medical officer rushed to her side, but looked utterly bewildered by her condition. "I can help her," Charles called out, struggling against the guard's grip. "Please, she needs immediate attention." Admiral Krell's face contorted with conflicting emotions: disgust at the genetic mixing, fear of a potential diplomatic incident if Tara died, and a grudging curiosity about the supposed breakthrough. "You have one chance," Krell growled, signaling the guards to release Charles. "Save her, or you'll wish you'd perished with that station." Charles didn't need to be told twice. He rushed to Tara's side, quickly assessing her condition. "Her system is overloading from the accelerated pregnancy," he explained, his hands moving swiftly to adjust the medical equipment. "We need to stabilize the embryo's growth rate." Working alongside the puzzled andromedan medical team, Charles implemented the techniques he and Dr. Zara had developed on the station. He called out instructions, explaining the unique needs of the hybrid pregnancy as he worked. Minutes ticked by, each second feeling like an eternity under Admiral Krell's intense scrutiny. Gradually, Tara's bioluminescence steadied, her vital signs returning to normal ranges. As the immediate crisis passed, a palpable shift occurred in the docking bay. The Andromedan medical team looked at Charles with a mixture of awe and uncertainty. Even Admiral Krell's stern expression had softened slightly. "It seems," Krell said slowly, "that we have much to discuss, Commander Vex." He turned to address the gathered crew. "Escort our guests to the medical bay. Keep them under close observation." As Charles and the others were led away, whispers rippled through the assembled Andromedans. News of the hybrid pregnancies spread like wildfire through the ship's communication channels. In the medical bay, Charles worked tirelessly alongside Dr. Zara, monitoring Tara and the other pregnant Andromedans. As they studied the accelerated development of the hybrid embryos, a startling revelation emerged. "Admiral," Dr. Zara called out, her voice trembling with excitement, "you need to see this. The hybrid embryos, their genetic structure is unlike anything we've ever seen. It's as if they've found a way to overcome our species' infertility." Admiral Krell leaned in, his eyes widening as he examined the data. For the first time since their arrival, a flicker of hope crossed his face, but the moment was short-lived. Alarms blared throughout the ship, and Security Chief Zorn's voice crackled over the intercom. "Admiral Krell." Zorn's voice was filled with hardly restrained rage. "A group of us cannot stand by while our genetic purity is corrupted. We're taking control of this ship and ending this abomination once and for all." The sound of weapons fire echoed in the distance. Admiral Krell's expression hardened as he realized the full scope of the crisis unfolding on his ship. "Battle stations," he commanded, his voice reverberating through the medical bay. "Protect the medical bay at all costs. The fate of our species may well depend on it." As the ship erupted into chaos, Charles looked at the frightened faces of Tara and the other pregnant Andromedans. He knew that the next few hours would determine not just his fate, but the future of an entire civilization. With a deep breath, he turned to Dr. Zara and nodded. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Together. The chaos around them faded into the background as they focused on the task at hand. Suddenly, Admiral Krell's voice cut through the tension. "Enough!" he bellowed, silencing the room. His bioluminescent patterns pulsed with authority as he surveyed the scene. "I've made my decision." The Admiral strode forward, positioning himself between Charles and the advancing security team. "Stand down," he ordered, his voice leaving no room for argument. "This human and his work may be our only hope for survival." Security Chief Zorn's face contorted with rage. "You can't be serious, Admiral. This is a violation of everything we stand for." "What we stand for, Chief Zorn, is the preservation of our species," Krell retorted. "And if this is what it takes, then so be it." With a swift series of commands, Krell mobilized the loyal members of his security force. They moved quickly, subduing Zorn and his followers. The sounds of struggle echoed through the medical bay as the extremists were disarmed and restrained. As the immediate threat subsided, Krell turned to Charles and Dr. Zara. "We need to talk. Now." Minutes later, they found themselves in the ship's main conference room. Commander Vex, key medical personnel, and a handful of trusted officers joined them. The tension in the air was palpable as Admiral Krell called the meeting to order. "Dr. Zara," he began, his voice grave, "explain to everyone, present the full implications of what we've discovered." Dr. Zara nodded, her bioluminescence pulsing with a mix of excitement and apprehension. She activated a holographic display showing the genetic structure of the hybrid embryos. As you can see, she explained, gesturing to the intricate patterns of DNA, the combination of human and andromedan genetic material has produced something entirely unprecedented. These embryos aren't just viable, they're thriving. More importantly, they show no signs of the genetic degradation that has plagued our species for generations. A murmur of astonishment rippled through the room. Charles watched as the andromedans' bioluminescent patterns shifted, reflecting their mix of hope and disbelief. "Are you saying," one of the medical officers asked, her voice barely above a whisper, "that this could be the cure for our infertility crisis?" Dr. Zara nodded solemnly. "It's more than possible. It's probable." The room erupted into a cacophony of voices, each Andromedan trying to process the magnitude of this revelation. Admiral Krell raised his hand, silencing the commotion. Before he could speak, an urgent alert blared through the ship's communication system. A young communications officer burst into the room, his bioluminescence flickering with alarm. "Admiral," he said, his voice trembling, "we're receiving a priority transmission from Novus Prime. They've detected our approach and are demanding an explanation for our unscheduled arrival." Krell's face hardened as he absorbed this new complication. He looked around the room, his gaze lingering on Charles, then on the data displayed by Dr. Zara. In that moment, Charles could see the weight of an entire civilization resting on the Admiral's shoulders. With a deep breath, Krell made his decision. "Open a channel to Novus Prime," he ordered. "It's time they learn the truth." The next few minutes were a blur of activity. Krell addressed the Novus Prime authorities, revealing the existence of the breeding program and its potential to save their species. The reaction was immediate and severe. "You have violated our most sacred laws." The voice of the Novus Prime governor boomed through the speakers. "Your ship is to remain in orbit, prepare to be boarded. All involved in this abomination will be detained and face the full consequences of their actions." As the transmission cut off, a heavy silence fell over the conference room. Admiral Krell's bioluminescence pulsed with purpose as he turned to his crew. "We cannot allow them to board," he stated firmly. "The future of our species may well rest in this ship. Helm, set a course away from Novus Prime. Maximum speed." The ship lurched as it changed direction, accelerating away from the Andromedan homeworld. Alarms blared throughout the vessel, signaling the beginning of a pursuit. "Sir," the tactical officer reported, "long-range sensors are detecting multiple ships launching from Novus Prime. They're on an intercept course." Krell's expression was grim as he surveyed the faces around him. "We can't outrun them forever," he said. "We need a plan." It was Charles who spoke up, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. "What about neutral space? Or human-controlled territory?" The suggestion sent shockwaves through the room. Seeking asylum with other species, particularly humans, was unthinkable to many Andromedans. And yet, as they considered their options, it became clear it might be their only choice. "It's treason," one of the officers whispered, his bioluminescence dim with shock. "It's survival," Krell countered. He turned to the helm officer. "Set a course for the nearest neutral space. We'll make our decision once we've bought ourselves some time." As the cruiser accelerated towards the unknown, the ship became a powder keg of conflicting emotions. Some crew members saw their actions as necessary for survival, while others viewed it as a betrayal of everything they held dear. Amid this turmoil, an urgent call came from the medical bay. "Dr. Zara," a voice crackled over the intercom. "It's Tara. Something's happening." Without hesitation, Charles and Dr. Zara rushed from the conference room, leaving behind the strategic discussions for a more immediate crisis. As they entered the medical bay, they found Tara writhing on a bed, her bioluminescence flickering erratically. "She's gone into labor," one of the medical assistants reported, his voice tinged with panic. "The accelerated gestation? We're not prepared for this." Charles moved to Tara's side, taking her hand. Her grip was like iron, her eyes wide with fear and pain. "It's okay," he assured her, his voice calm despite the chaos around them. "We're going to get through this together." As Dr. Zara and her team scrambled to prepare for the impending birth, Charles stayed by Tara's side, offering what comfort he could. The medical bay became a flurry of activity, a stark contrast to the eerie silence of space outside, where an uncertain future awaited them all. As Charles stood by Tara's side, the medical bay erupted into frenzied activity. The newborn hybrid's first cries filled the air, a sound unlike anything the Andromedans had ever heard before. It was a moment of triumph, but also one of uncertainty as the ship continued its desperate flight from Novus Prime. Suddenly, the ship lurched violently. Red warning lights flashed throughout the medical bay as the ship's sensors detected an immense energy signature rapidly approaching. "All hands, brace for impact!" Admiral Krell's voice boomed over the intercom. Charles instinctively shielded Tara and the newborn as a blinding light engulfed the ship. For a moment, it felt as if reality itself was bending around them. When the light faded, an eerie silence fell over the medical bay. Dr. Zara was the first to recover. She rushed to a nearby console, her bioluminescence flickering with confusion. "Admiral," she called out, "you need to see this. We're not where we were." The main view screen activated, revealing a vast expanse of unfamiliar space. But what truly caught everyone's attention was the massive structure looming before them. It was a space station, but unlike anything they had ever encountered. Its architecture was a mesmerizing blend of various galactic styles, seamlessly integrated into a colossal whole. Before anyone could react, a transmission cut through the ship's communications. A calm, melodious voice filled the air. "Greetings, travelers. Welcome to the Nexus, a neutral ground for interspecies cooperation and conflict resolution. We are the Arbiters, and we have been observing your situation with great interest." Admiral Krell stepped forward, his bioluminescence pulsing with a mix of wariness and curiosity. "Arbiters, what is the meaning of this? Why have you brought us here?" The voice responded, "We see great potential in your current dilemma, both for conflict and for progress. We invite you, Admiral Krell, along with the human Charles, Dr. Zara, and a small delegation to board the Nexus and present your case." As the crew absorbed this unexpected turn of events, Tara struggled to sit up, cradling her newborn. "I need to go," she said, her voice weak but determined. "They need to see, to understand." Charles started to protest, concerned for her health, but Admiral Krell intervened. "She's right. The presence of the hybrid child could be crucial to our case." He turned to Charles and Dr. Zara. "Prepare yourselves. We leave for the Nexus in 10 minutes. As they approached the Nexus in a shuttle, the true scale of the station became apparent. It dwarfed even the largest Andromedan constructions, its surface dotted with countless docking bays and observation windows. Upon entering the station, the delegation was immediately struck by the diversity of life forms bustling through its corridors. Beings of all shapes, sizes, and compositions moved about, engaged in what appeared to be diplomatic discussions, scientific exchanges, and cultural interactions. Their escorts, the Arbiters, were a sight to behold. Tall, ethereal beings with translucent skin that shimmered with an inner light, they guided the group through the station with graceful efficiency. As they entered a vast circular chamber, Charles felt a sudden tension ripple through the Andromedan members of their group. Across the room stood a delegation from Novus Prime, including members of the Andromedan High Command. Their bioluminescence patterns flickered with a mix of anger and apprehension at the sight of Admiral Krell and his team. The Arbiter's spokesperson, a being of subtle iridescence, stepped forward. "We have gathered all parties involved to address this situation comprehensively. Each faction will present its case, and then we shall deliberate on the best course of action for all involved." As the hearing began, Charles watched the interplay of arguments with growing fascination. The Novus Prime officials vehemently opposed the hybrid program, citing risks to Andromedan genetic purity. The High Command, while critical of the unsanctioned nature of the experiment, showed clear interest in its potential to solve their infertility crisis. When it came time for their side to present, Charles stepped forward with Dr. Zara. They presented the scientific data on the hybrid embryos, explaining the breakthrough they had achieved. As they spoke, Tara moved to the center of the chamber, holding her child for all to see. The effect was immediate. A hush fell over the assembled aliens as they gazed upon the healthy, bioluminescent infant. It was living proof of what Charles and Dr. Zara had been arguing, a viable solution to the Andromedan's genetic dead end. As the proceedings continued, an unexpected development occurred. Representatives from other species in attendance began to approach the arbiters, engaged in hushed but animated discussions. Charles couldn't make out what was being said, but he could see the arbiters' expressions shift from surprise to intrigue. Finally, one of the arbiters raised a hand, calling for silence. "Esteemed delegates," the being announced, "we have received an unprecedented proposal. Several species have offered to assist in expanding the hybrid program, suggesting a collaborative effort to find a comprehensive solution to the Andromedan infertility crisis." The chamber erupted into a cacophony of voices. The Andromedans, in particular, seemed torn between shock at the idea of further genetic mixing and hope for a more robust solution to their problem. As heated debates broke out across the chamber, Charles noticed something alarming. Several of the pregnant Andromedans who had accompanied them were showing signs of distress, their bioluminescence patterns shifting rapidly. Dr. Zara noticed it too. She rushed to examine them, her face growing increasingly concerned. "Charles," she called out urgently, "something's wrong. The hybrid pregnancies, they're accelerating at an alarming rate." The medical emergency cut through the political tensions like a knife. Suddenly, all factions found themselves united by a common urgency. The arbiters quickly offered access to the Nexus's advanced medical facilities, while representatives from various species stepped forward, offering their unique expertise. As they rushed the distressed Andromedans to the medical bay, Charles found himself at the center of a whirlwind of activity. Aliens of all kinds worked alongside Dr. Zara and the Andromedan medical team, their diverse knowledge and technologies, combining in ways Charles could hardly comprehend. In that moment, as species who had been at odds just minutes before now worked together to save lives, Charles realized that the consequences of his actions had grown far beyond anything he could have imagined. The fate of not just the Andromedan species, but potentially the future of galactic cooperation, now hung in the balance. As alarms blared and the medical team worked feverishly to stabilize the accelerating pregnancies, Charles knew that the real challenges and the real opportunities were only just beginning. The medical bay erupted into chaos as alarms blared, signaling the rapid acceleration of the hybrid pregnancies. Dr. Zara's bioluminescence pulsed with intensity as she barked orders to her team. "We need to stabilize their hormone levels immediately. Prepare the stasis fields." The diverse group of alien specialists rushed to assist, each bringing unique expertise to the crisis. A xyloxian with multiple appendages deftly manipulated holographic displays, while a gelatinous morbulian pulsed with bioluminescent patterns, communicating complex biological data faster than any verbal language could. Charles, still at Tara's side, found himself thrust into the center of the emergency. "Dr. Zara," he called out, "the hormone fluctuations, they're similar to what we saw with Tara, but at an exponential rate." Dr. Zara's eyes widened. "Of course. Charles, we need your insights. What did you observe during Tara's accelerated gestation?" As Charles relayed his observations, the medical team worked feverishly to apply this knowledge to the current crisis. The Nexus's advanced medical facilities hummed with energy as cutting-edge treatments were administered to the distressed Andromedans. Amidst the frenzy, Admiral Krell received an urgent transmission. His bioluminescence flickered with surprise as he listened to the message from the Andromedan High Command. "Dr. Zara," he called out, his voice cutting through the din. "The High Command has analyzed the data from the hybrid births. They believe we may have stumbled upon the key to our species' survival." The news sent a ripple of excitement through the medical bay, but there was no time to celebrate. The immediate crisis demanded their full attention. Hours passed in a blur of activity. Charles found himself working alongside beings he could scarcely have imagined just days ago, all united in their efforts to save the Andromedan mothers and their unborn children. Finally, as the last of the hybrid infants was safely delivered, an exhausted hush fell over the medical bay. Dr. Zara slumped against a console, her bioluminescence dim with fatigue. "We did it," she breathed. They're all stable. The moment of relief was short-lived. An arbiter glided into the medical bay, its translucent form shimmering with an inner light. "Your efforts here haven't gone unnoticed," it announced. "We propose a solution that may benefit all." The arbiter outlined a plan to establish a dedicated research facility on the Nexus, where andromedan scientists could work alongside experts from other species to study the hybrid pregnancies and develop a cure for their infertility. Admiral Krell's bioluminescence pulsed with interest. "A bold proposal," he mused, "but how will Novus Prime react?" The answer came swiftly as heated debates erupted in the Nexus's vast chambers. Charles found himself at the center of yet another storm, as the arbiters proposed his continued involvement in the research program. "Me?" Charles sputtered, overwhelmed by the implications. "But I'm not a scientist." Tara, who had been resting nearby, struggled to sit up. "You're more than that, Charles," she said, her voice weak but determined. "You're the bridge between our species. Your involvement could be the key to everything." As discussions intensified, a new complication arose. Other species on the Nexus, intrigued by the potential of hybrid genetics, began clamoring for involvement in similar programs. The arbiters, their forms shimmering with increased intensity, called for order. "We propose the creation of an interspecies genetic cooperation treaty," they announced, "a framework to guide us into this new frontier of galactic cooperation." While diplomats argued over the details of the treaty, the medical bay was once again thrown into a frenzy. The hybrid children, barely days old, were displaying signs of accelerated growth and cognitive development. "This is unprecedented," Dr. Zara muttered, her bioluminescence pulsing with a mix of excitement and concern as she examined one of the infants. "Their neural pathways are developing at an exponential rate." Charles watched in awe as a hybrid child, who should have been a helpless newborn, focused its eyes on him with unsettling intelligence. "How is this possible?" he asked. A Quantian scientist, its crystalline form refracting light in complex patterns, offered a theory. The unique energies of the Nexus, combined with their hybrid genetics, may be catalyzing their development. The implications are staggering. As the situation grew increasingly complex, Charles found himself torn. The opportunity to remain on the Nexus and contribute to this groundbreaking research was tantalizing, but the weight of the responsibility was daunting. Admiral Krell approached him, his bioluminescence subdued. "The High Command is pressuring me to return with the hybrids and all our research data," he said quietly. "But I fear that would be short-sighted. Your thoughts, Charles?" Before Charles could respond, an alert sounded throughout the Nexus. The arbiters' voices resonated through the station. "All representatives, please convene in the Grand Chamber. The first draft of the Interspecies Genetic Cooperation Treaty is ready for review." As they made their way to the chamber, Charles caught sight of the vast expanse of space through a viewport. Countless stars twinkled in the void, each potentially home to civilizations that might one day be impacted by the decisions made here. The Grand Chamber buzzed with tension as representatives from dozens of species took their places. At the center, a holographic display shimmered into existence, displaying the first articles of the proposed treaty. Charles took a deep breath, acutely aware that his next words and actions could shape the future of not just the Andromedan species, but potentially the entire galaxy. The weight of the moment pressed down on him as the arbiters called the historic session to order. Order. The chamber fell silent as the arbiters began to outline the treaty's key points. Suddenly, a commotion erupted near the entrance. Dr. Zara burst in, her bioluminescence pulsing with urgency. "Forgive the interruption," she gasped, "but you need to see this immediately." The arbiters paused, their shimmering forms rippling with curiosity. They gestured for Dr. Zara to approach. "The hybrid children," she explained, activating a holographic display. "Their development is accelerating at an unprecedented rate." The chamber filled with murmurs as the assembled delegates watched time-lapse footage of the hybrid infants. In a matter of days, they had grown from newborns to toddlers, their eyes alight with an eerie intelligence. Charles stared in disbelief. How is this possible? A Quantian scientist stepped forward, its crystalline form refracting light as it moved. We believe the unique energies of the Nexus, combined with their hybrid genetics, are catalyzing their growth and cognitive development. The implications of this revelation sent shockwaves through the assembly. Species that had been hesitant about the hybrid program now clamored for involvement, seeing the potential benefits for their own kind. As the days turned into weeks, Charles found himself at the center of a whirlwind of activity. The hybrid children matured rapidly, reaching adolescence in a matter of months. Their cognitive abilities outpaced even the most optimistic projections, and they displayed remarkable physical traits that seemed to combine the best of both human and andromedan physiology. Dr. Zara worked tirelessly, studying the hybrid's unique biology. One afternoon, as Charles observed a group of hybrid teenagers interfacing with advanced Nexus technology, Dr. Zara's bioluminescence flared with excitement. "Charles, look at this," she exclaimed, pointing to a display showing neural activity. "They're not just using the interface, they're communicating with it directly through their bioluminescence." The discovery sent ripples through the scientific community on the Nexus. The hybrids possessed a form of bioelectric communication that allowed them to interface seamlessly with complex systems, opening up possibilities in fields ranging from medicine to space exploration. As news of the hybrids' abilities spread, Charles noticed increased security measures throughout the Nexus. The Arbiters implemented strict protocols to protect the hybrid children and regulate access to the research. One evening, as Charles sat with Terra and their rapidly maturing offspring, Admiral Krell approached, his bioluminescence dim with concern. "Charles, we have a situation," Krell said quietly. "The High Command is demanding our return. They want the hybrids and all our research data." Charles felt a chill run down his spine. "But the program's just beginning to show results. We can't abandon it now." Krell nodded grimly. "I agree, which is why I've made a decision." He took a deep breath, his bioluminescence pulsing with perseverance. "I'm requesting asylum for myself, my crew, and the hybrids. We'll continue our work here on the Nexus." The news of Krell's decision spread quickly, triggering a diplomatic crisis. Reports came in of an andromedan fleet dispatched to their last known coordinates, demanding the return of their citizens and research data. The Nexus hummed with activity as the Arbiters activated advanced cloaking and defense systems. Charles watched from a viewport as shimmering energy fields enveloped the station, rendering it invisible to outside sensors. Amidst the growing tension, Charles's hybrid child, now a teenager, approached him with a group of peers. Their eyes glowed with an otherworldly intelligence as they presented a bold plan. "Father," the child said, its voice a melodious blend of human and andromedan tones, "we want to act as ambassadors. We can use our abilities to communicate directly with the Andromedan fleet, show them the benefits of our existence in this research." Charles marveled at their maturity and initiative. The Arbiters, after careful consideration, agreed to the plan. A delegation was quickly assembled, including Charles, Terra, and a team of Arbiter peacekeepers. As they prepared to board a specially designed diplomatic vessel, Dr. Zara rushed to meet them, her bioluminescence pulsing with excitement. "Charles, I've made a breakthrough," she said breathlessly. "I've identified a key genetic sequence in the hybrid DNA. It could be the key to solving the Andromedan infertility crisis." Charles's mind raced with the implications. This discovery could change everything, but implementing it would require widespread genetic modification among the Andromedan population. He knew they would face significant cultural and political resistance. As the diplomatic mission prepared to depart, Charles gazed at the assembled hybrid children, their forms shimmering with a mix of human and Andromedan traits. They stood on the precipice of a new era, one that could reshape the future of multiple species across the galaxy. The Nexus's docking bay doors slid open, revealing the vast expanse of space beyond. As their ship engaged its engines, Charles felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. The outcome of this mission would determine not just the fate of the hybrid children, but the future of interspecies cooperation throughout the galaxy. As they accelerated away from the Nexus, the hybrid children began to glow softly, their bioluminescence pulsing in complex patterns. They were preparing to make first contact with the approaching Andromedan fleet, ready to demonstrate the full extent of their unique abilities. The diplomatic vessel streaked through space, carrying with it the hopes and fears of countless beings. Whatever the outcome, Charles knew that the galaxy would never be the same again. As their ship accelerated away from the Nexus, Charles felt a mix of anticipation and trepidation. The hybrid children's bioluminescence intensified, casting an ethereal glow throughout the vessel's interior. Their eyes, a striking blend of human and andromedan features, focused intently on the screen as the Andromedan fleet came into view. "Initiating contact," announced the ship's AI, "preparing to transmit hybrid biosignatures." The hybrid children moved in perfect synchronization, their bioelectric fields merging into a complex pulsating pattern. The ship's sensors projected their unique energy signature towards the Andromedan flagship. Tara's hand found Charles's, her grip tightening as they waited for a response. Seconds stretched into minutes, the silence broken only by the soft hum of the ship's systems. Suddenly, the comm system crackled to life. An Andromedan voice, harsh and commanding, filled the cabin. "Unknown vessel, you are in violation of Andromedan space. Power down your systems and prepare to be boarded." Before Charles could respond, the sensors blared a warning. "Weapons lock detected. Multiple Andromedan ships charging weapons arrays." The hybrid children exchanged glances, their bioluminescence flickering rapidly. The eldest, a girl named Lyra, stepped forward. "We can amplify our signal," she said, her voice a melodious blend of human and Andromedan tones. "Perhaps if they could see us more clearly—" Charles nodded, giving the children permission to proceed. Their combined bioelectric field intensified, projecting a vivid holographic display into space. It showcased their unique physiology, the intricate blend of human and Andromedan DNA that made them who they were. The effect was immediate. The Andromedan ship's weapon signatures fluctuated, then powered down. A new voice came over the comm, this one infused with curiosity. "Fascinating. These energy patterns, they're unlike anything we've seen before." Taking advantage of the moment, Charles opened a channel. "This is Charles, representative of the Nexus hybrid program. We come in peace, seeking dialogue." As he spoke, Admiral Krell's face appeared on a secondary screen, transmitting from the Nexus. "Andromedan High Command, I implore you to hear us out. We've made a breakthrough that could change everything." Krell proceeded to outline Dr. Zara's discovery, explaining how the hybrid genetic sequence could potentially solve the Andromedan infertility crisis. The revelation sent shockwaves through the Andromedan fleet. Heated discussions could be heard in the background of their transmissions. The tense standoff stretched on, with Charles and his family waiting anxiously for the Andromedan's decision. Suddenly, alarms blared throughout their ship. A rogue Andromedan warship had broken formation, accelerating towards them with weapons hot. "Evasive maneuvers!" Charles shouted, leaping for the navigation controls. He drew upon skills he hadn't used since his days as an inmate, fingers flying across the interface as he steered the ship into a series of tight turns and rolls. Tara was already at the defensive systems, her skin pulsing with bioluminescent patterns as she coordinated with the hybrid children. "Protective field engaged," she reported, her voice steady despite the chaos. The rogue ship opened fire, energy beams lancing through space. Charles's piloting skills were put to the test as he wove through the barrage, the ship shuddering with each near miss. The hybrid children's protective field shimmered, absorbing the few shots that came too close. Just as it seemed they couldn't hold out much longer, the Andromedan flagship moved into position, interposing itself between the diplomatic vessel and the attacker. Its powerful weapons made short work of the rogue ship's defenses, forcing it to stand down. In the aftermath of the attack, a new message came through from the Andromedan High Command. "Representatives of the Nexus, we apologize for this incident. Your actions have given us much to consider. We invite you aboard our flagship to continue this discussion." As they docked with the Andromedan ship, Charles couldn't help but feel a sense of déjà vu. Once again, he was stepping into the unknown, the fate of multiple species potentially hanging in the balance. But this time, he wasn't alone. With Tara by his side and their remarkable children leading the way, he felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The hybrid children took the lead as they boarded the Andromedan flagship, their advanced cognitive abilities immediately apparent as they engaged the Andromedan High Command in complex discussions. Charles and Tara watched with a mixture of pride and awe as their offspring bridged cultural gaps with ease, offering unique insights into the potential benefits of continued cooperation. As the negotiations progressed, Charles received an urgent communication from Dr. Zara back on the Nexus. Her face appeared on his personal communicator, her bioluminescence pulsing with excitement. "Charles, we've made another breakthrough," she said, her voice barely containing her enthusiasm. "The hybrid children's bodies have developed a natural resistance to several diseases that have long affected both humans and Andromedans. This could have far-reaching implications beyond just the infertility crisis." Charles shared this news with the Andromedan leadership, watching as it sparked a new wave of interest and debate among their scientists. The potential for disease resistance added another layer of complexity to the already intricate negotiations. As discussions continued, Charles and Tara found themselves at the center of intense scientific scrutiny. Andromedan researchers, fascinated by their successful hybrid conception, requested permission to study their genetic compatibility in more detail. Charles met Tara's eyes, seeing his own uncertainty reflected there. The request felt invasive, yet the potential to further the research that could save the Andromedan species was undeniable. They would need to make a decision soon, balancing their personal comfort against the greater good. Meanwhile, the hybrid children continued to impress the Andromedan leadership with their diplomatic skills and unique perspectives. Their ability to interface directly with Andromedan technology through their bioluminescence opened up new possibilities for collaboration and scientific advancement. As the hours stretched on, a consensus began to form. The Andromedan High Command, swayed by the hybrid children's demonstrations and the potential for a cure to their infertility, agreed to support the continuation of the research program on the Nexus. They proposed establishing a permanent Andromedan presence on the station to facilitate ongoing collaboration and monitor the hybrid children's development. However, this decision was not without its complications. As news of the hybrid program began to spread, reports came in of protests erupting on several Andromedan worlds. Conservative groups decried the mixing of species as an affront to their genetic purity, while others viewed it as a necessary step for survival. As the diplomatic mission prepared to return to the Nexus, now accompanied by a contingent of Andromedan scientists and diplomats, Charles and Tara found themselves facing a new set of challenges. They had succeeded in their immediate goal of averting conflict and securing Andromedan cooperation, but the road ahead was far from clear. The couple watched as their hybrid children, wise beyond their years yet still so young, prepared for the journey back. They would be returning to a Nexus transformed by recent events, with new opportunities and obstacles awaiting them. As pioneers of interspecies collaboration, Charles and Tara knew they would play a crucial role in shaping the future of this bold experiment. As their ship disengaged from the Andromedan flagship, Charles took one last look at the vast Andromedan fleet. What had begun as a potential confrontation had transformed into the first steps of a new era of cooperation. Yet as they set course for the Nexus, he couldn't shake the feeling that their greatest challenges still lay ahead. The journey back to the Nexus was filled with a mixture of anticipation and uncertainty. As they approached the massive space station, Charles noticed a flurry of activity around its docking bays. Numerous ships of various designs were arriving and departing, their hulls gleaming in the light of nearby stars. "Looks like word has spread fast," Tara observed, her bioluminescence pulsing with a mix of excitement and concern. The moment their ship docked, they were greeted by a delegation led by Dr. Zara. Her eyes were bright with enthusiasm as she rushed to meet them. "Charles, Tara, we've been eagerly awaiting your return," she said, her words tumbling out in a rush. "The success of your mission has sparked an unprecedented wave of interest in our research." As they made their way through the bustling corridors of the Nexus, Charles noticed the changes that had taken place in their absence. New signage in multiple languages directed visitors to expanded laboratory facilities and medical centers. The air hummed with the excitement of scientific discovery. Dr. Zara led them to a newly constructed wing of the station. We've set up dedicated facilities for the continuation of our genetic research, she explained. With the Andromedan scientists on board, we're making rapid progress in understanding the intricacies of hybrid physiology. Charles and Tara exchanged glances, both sensing the weight of the decision they would soon have to make. The Andromedan researchers' request to study their genetic compatibility in more detail still hung in the air. Before they could discuss it further, they were interrupted by a group of young hybrids rushing towards them. Among them was Lyra, her eyes shining with intelligence beyond her years. "Mom, Dad," she called out, her voice carrying the melodious tones that were uniquely hers. "You have to see what we've been working on." Lyra led them to a state-of-the-art education center, where hybrid children were engaged in complex simulations and experiments. Their ability to interface directly with the technology through their bioluminescence was a sight to behold. "We've outgrown the old facilities," Lyra explained proudly. "The Arbiters have been amazing in supporting our development." As they watched the young hybrids at work, an Arbiter approached them. "Charles, Tara, your presence is requested in the main conference room," the Arbiter said, its multifaceted eyes gleaming. "There are important matters to discuss regarding the future of the hybrid program." In the conference room, they found themselves facing a panel of Arbiters, human scientists, and Andromedan diplomats. The atmosphere was charged with a mix of excitement and tension. An Arbiter stepped forward, its voice resonating through the room. "The success of the human Andromedan hybrid program has opened doors we never thought possible. However, it has also created new challenges." The Arbiter gestured towards a holographic display, showing a queue of Andromedan ships waiting to dock with the Nexus. "Thousands of Andromedans are seeking treatment for infertility. Our resources are stretched thin." A human scientist spoke up next. "To address concerns from other species about being left out, we're proposing a lottery system for non-Andromedan species to participate in controlled hybrid breeding programs." Charles felt all eyes turn to him. "Given your unique compatibility with Andromedan physiology, we'd like you to serve as a genetic consultant for these new programs," the scientist continued. Tara squeezed Charles's hand, sensing his unease at being thrust into the spotlight once again. She stepped forward, her bioluminescence pulsing steadily. "I'd like to offer my services as well," she said. "My experience as both an Andromedan and a mother to a hybrid child could provide valuable insights." The Arbiter nodded approvingly. "We were hoping you'd say that, Tara. We're forming a new department dedicated to integrating hybrid children into galactic society. Your perspective would be invaluable." As the meeting continued, Dr. Zara burst into the room, her bioluminescence flashing with excitement. "We've made a breakthrough," she announced breathlessly. "The hybrid researchers have combined their bioelectric abilities with our technology to develop a prototype for a new form of faster-than-light travel." The room erupted in a flurry of excited conversation. The implications of such a discovery were staggering, promising to revolutionize space exploration and interspecies communication. Amidst the excitement, an Andromedan diplomat raised a hand for silence. "While this news is indeed remarkable, we must also address a growing concern," he said gravely. "We've received reports of shadowy organizations attempting to steal hybrid genetic data. The value of this research has not gone unnoticed by those who would use it for their own gain." The mood in the room sobered quickly. Charles felt a chill run down his spine as he thought of his family's unique genetic profiles. The Arbiter, sensing the shift in atmosphere, spoke up. "We will be implementing enhanced security measures immediately. Charles, Tara, given your family's importance to the program, you will be placed under special protection." As the meeting drew to a close, Charles and Tara found themselves facing a future far more complex than they had ever imagined. They had come to the Nexus seeking a new beginning, but now found themselves at the center of a scientific revolution that could reshape the galaxy. Walking back to their quarters, Charles turned to Tara. "Are we ready for this?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Tara's bioluminescence pulsed softly, a pattern that Charles had come to recognize as her way of expressing willpower. "Ready or not, it's here," she replied. "But we're not alone. We have each other, our children, and an entire station full of brilliant minds working towards a common goal." As they reached their quarters, they found Lyra waiting for them, her eyes alight with curiosity. "Mom, Dad, what happened at the meeting? Is everything okay?" Charles and Tara exchanged glances, knowing that the decisions they would make in the coming days would shape not only their family's future, but potentially the future of multiple species across the galaxy. The weight of responsibility settled on their shoulders, but with it came a sense of purpose and hope. "Everything's fine, sweetheart," Tara said, her bioluminescence pulsing warmly. "In fact, things are about to get very interesting around here." "Here." Charles nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. As they prepared for bed that night, a priority message came through on their personal communicator. Admiral Krell's holographic image appeared, his expression serious. "Charles, Tara, I apologize for the late hour, but this couldn't wait," he said. "The Andromedan Congress has requested your presence for an emergency session. We need you to address them directly about the hybrid program and its implications for our species." Charles and Tara exchanged glances, their fatigue instantly forgotten. "When do they want us there?" Charles asked. "As soon as possible," Krell replied. "We've arranged for a shuttle to transport you to the Andromedan homeworld tomorrow morning. Your hybrid child should accompany you as well. Their presence will be impactful." After Krell's image faded, Charles and Tara spent the night preparing for their journey. They knew the stakes were high. The future of interspecies cooperation hung in the balance. The next morning, as they made their way to the hangar, the atmosphere on the Nexus was electric with tension. Scientists and diplomats hurried through the corridors, their faces etched with concern. Just as they reached the specially designed shuttle that would take them to the Andromedan homeworld, alarms began blaring throughout the station. Red emergency lights bathed the hangar in an eerie glow. "Warning! Security breach detected. All personnel report to designated safe zones," an automated voice announced over the intercom. Dr. Zara's voice crackled over their communicators. "Charles, Tara, we're under attack. A group of extremists opposed to the hybrid program has infiltrated the Nexus. You need to leave now." Heart pounding, Charles ushered Tara and their child onto the shuttle. A small security team scrambled aboard just as the hangar doors began to close. "Hold on!" Charles shouted as he took the pilot's seat. He fired up the engines and launched the shuttle, narrowly squeezing through the closing hangar doors. As they sped away from the Nexus, enemy ships appeared on their tail. Charles's hands flew over the controls, drawing on years of experience as he executed a series of evasive maneuvers. "We need to shake them off," he muttered, steering the shuttle towards a nearby asteroid field. Tara, her bioluminescence pulsing rapidly, placed her hands on the shuttle's control panel. "I think I can help," she said, closing her eyes in concentration. The shuttle's shields suddenly flared brighter, its energy output increasing. Their hybrid child, now a young adolescent, watched wide-eyed as the pursuing ships grew closer. Suddenly, their skin began to glow, mimicking Tara's bioluminescence, but with an intensity neither parent had seen before. I think I can do something," the child said, voice trembling with a mix of fear and perseverance. They placed their hands on the communication array, and to everyone's amazement, the system came alive with new energy. "They're interfacing with the shuttle systems," one of the security team members exclaimed. Through their unique bioelectric abilities, the child managed to boost the shuttle's communication range exponentially. A distress signal pulsed out, reaching not only the Nexus but also the Andromedan fleet. Charles skillfully navigated through the asteroid field, using the large space rocks as cover. The pursuing ships, less maneuverable than their smaller shuttle, fell behind, some colliding with asteroids in their attempt to keep up. As they emerged from the other side of the field, a massive fleet of Andromedan ships appeared before them. For a heart-stopping moment, Charles wasn't sure if they were about to be welcomed or attacked. Then Admiral Krell's voice came through loud and clear on the comm system. "Charles, Tara, this is Admiral Krell. We received your distress signal. The fleet is here to escort you safely to the surface. Follow our lead." Relief washed over the shuttle's occupants as they fell into formation with the Andromedan ships. As they descended towards the Andromedan homeworld, Charles could see the grand assembly hall of the Andromedan Congress, its crystalline spires gleaming in the light of the system's twin suns. Upon landing, they were quickly ushered into the assembly hall. The chamber was packed with andromedan dignitaries, their bioluminescence creating a dazzling light show. As Charles, Tara, and their child took the podium, a hush fell over the crowd. Charles took a deep breath and began to speak, recounting their journey from their first encounter as prisoner and guard to their current role as pioneers of interspecies cooperation. He spoke of the challenges they had faced and overcome, emphasizing the potential benefits of the hybrid program. Tara stepped forward next, her bioluminescence pulsing with passion as she addressed the assembly. Evolution and adaptation have always been part of Andromedan history, she said, her voice strong and clear. The hybrid program isn't a threat to our species. It's the key to our survival and growth. Their child then moved to the front, their unique appearance drawing gasps and murmurs from the crowd. With a confidence that belied their years, they demonstrated their advanced abilities, interfacing effortlessly with the hall's technology and articulating a vision of a future where species boundaries blurred in pursuit of common goals. As they spoke, a message from the Nexus appeared on the hall's main screen. The extremist attack had been repelled, and the hybrid research data was secure. Moreover, news of the attack had spread quickly, galvanizing support for the program among other species who now saw the hybrids as a unifying force in the face of division. The Andromedan Congress, moved by the family's testimony and the show of interspecies solidarity, called for an immediate vote on implementing the cure for Andromedan infertility. The chamber buzzed with activity as the votes were cast and tallied. Finally, the head of the Congress stood, raising her hands for silence. "The motion to implement the cure passes," she announced, her voice ringing through the hall, with an overwhelming majority. The chamber erupted in a cacophony of light and sound as the Andromedans celebrated this historic decision. Charles pulled Tara and their child close, overcome with emotion. They had done it. They had changed the course of history. As the celebration continued around them, Admiral Krell approached, his expression a mix of relief and excitement. "Well done," he said, clasping Charles' shoulder. "But our work is nowhere near the end. The implementation of the cure will require careful oversight, and there are still those who oppose our efforts." Charles nodded, understanding the challenges that lay ahead. "We're ready," he said, looking at Tara and their child. "Whatever comes next, we'll face it together." As they prepared to leave the assembly hall, Charles couldn't help but marvel at the unexpected turns their lives had taken. From a chance encounter in a prison cell to reshaping the future of multiple civilizations, it was more than he could have ever imagined. Yet as they stepped out into the Andromedan sunlight, he knew that their journey was just getting started. New challenges awaited them, new frontiers to explore. But with Tara by his side and their remarkable child leading the way, Charles felt ready to face whatever the future might hold.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.